here with all of you to talk about her two books, actually, one which is already published called the Rana Cookbook, and one which we're going to talk about a little bit through our discussion, and it'll hit the stores in January next year. So let's begin by looking at your journey into food and your first brushes with it. How did your journey in cooking and food begin, and what are some of your fondest memories around it?
Thank you so much, Millie. It's such an honor to be here, taking part in this fantastic Kalinga Literary Festival. Let me just say that Kalinga is very close to my heart because my younger daughter is married in Orissa, and I have been to the state a couple of times. So it's so beautiful to bring that culture here to Kathmandu. And Millie, when you speak about my culinary journey, it starts very young. I have been a foodie, I think, since I was a small child, nice plump child with two plaits. And they said, in those days we used to have those chit buttons, on the dresses. So they used to say when I giggled, all my buttons would open because I was so nice and plump. It just shows that I was very fond of eating. So when you're fond of eating, I think it naturally results in being fond of food and cooking, and therefore wanting to entertain and feed people as well. So my earlier memories are from the place I grew up in, which is Nainital, a beautiful idyllic hill station, as Sneh will know. And the summer, which was the season time, as it was called, was full of family and friends coming to visit and getting away from the heat of India. And there would be this round of coffee mornings and lunches and dinners. And my memories are of those, parties laden with food and people laughing and the clinking of glasses, horse riding, sailing, picnic baskets, all centering around food. My family itself is a total foodie family, very, very interested in cooking. Our conversation during lunch would be, what are we cooking for dinner? And who's making the best meal, or whose favorite dish is being cooked. So that is how my memory goes back to food. Very connected. I have had no formal training as such, but just being with the family. My mother cooked, my brother cooks, my sister-in-law cooks. We used to have these various khansamas and cooks because my parents ran a hotel. So we used to learn, eat, and imbibe from that atmosphere. So that is, I never had any formal trainings, like I said earlier, but just imbibing that atmosphere of food has led me on this, my passion for cooking.
No, I think it shows in your book because, it is like the family cookbook, the Rana cookbook. Your first book contains family recipes, stories, and the whole, I think, the aura, of how food mixed with culture, becomes such an integral part of our lives. So how did you go about writing the Rana cookbook? Because, this writing cookbooks, by the way, is not easy. I worked on some. It involves not only writing the recipes, the text, the introductions, but also, testing the recipes. There are nice pictures that you have to shoot. So what made you write the book, and how did you go about this whole process?
Okay, this is a very interesting journey, really, because my husband was, when he was a colonel, was posted in this barrack called Suparitar, which is next to Hitora. That was his first battalion command. And being a very professional, thorough soldier, he was busy with his soldiering. So I was the only woman there between 800 men, and lived in this really pretty bungalow in the middle of the hills, in the middle of the jungles, built by the Ranas. It used to be their previous hunting resort site where they camped and then started off on their shikar journeys. And I had a lovely dog there, so I used to be walking in the jungles, but very much on my own and getting bored. So the idea germinated there, that since I'm so fond of food, let me start doing something about it. So I started the introduction of that book right there. And the foolscap paper, the army foolscap paper, I just wrote down the introduction, whatever I knew about the Rana cuisine and the way they ate and their introduction. In fact, the same introduction was in the book, just a couple of words changed 30 years later. And I even wrote down the different recipes that I wanted to research. I wrote down the names of the people, the aunts and uncle-in-laws that who I knew were fond of cooking and I would be referring to later. And that's how it started. And it just stayed there, germinated, started, and stayed there, literally in incubation for the next 30 years. Life got the better of me. The children were growing up, going to college, working, getting married, having grandchildren. And people would ask me, what happened to your cookbook? And I'd say, yes, yes, later, later. I just don't have the time right now. And then my husband, through climbing the ranks up the army, becoming chief, was another very stressful, very busy period. I had no time for anything else. After he retired and we were well settled at home, doing literally nothing much but having fun, the idea came back that I should finish this project that I started so many years back. And that's how I got down to then finishing it.
Well, we're lucky to have some time off, I think, after retirement, that you got to write the book. We have a gorgeous book. We have some copies outside in case you want to have a look. So tell us about the typical Rana thali.
Okay.
What does it consist of, and what are the most important ingredients?
Okay, typical Rana thali would be like a Nepali thali, basically. Nepali food and Rana food is similar in the same, we have the same varieties of food. We have the same rice, we have the same dal, the lentils, the meat, the vegetables, the pickles, the achar. So Rana thali is just, the difference between a typical Nepali food and Rana food is that Rana food is a little richer. It is influenced from North India. And the saying goes that after Jang Bahadur went for to help the British in the mutiny, and he imbibed a lot of ideas on architecture, on culture, and everything else, and brought back some of the Mughal khansamas. Khansamas are cooks, and that's where the integration of the Mughal food into the Nepali cuisine took place. Now, the Ranas were very orthodox Hindus, extremely orthodox. And their kitchens were run like, totally well managed super machinery. The only Brahmins could cook for them or a person of their own household, being very traditional Hindus. And so one figures where did the Muslim khansamas come in? They used to have a special kitchen outside the premises where they were allowed to cook. And if a person was eating rice, that food would not be included. So it was usually at tea time that but slowly became a little more lax. And the richer preparations from the southern neighbor infiltrated the Rana kitchens, and that's why it's called Rana cuisine. It's little richer and heavier, with more spicy, more ghee and tail, and oil and spices, and the gravies were thicker. So that is the difference in a Rana thali. And like I said, it involves rice, dal, meats, vegetables. Have to have fresh vegetables. Had to have fresh achars made every day with the old ones as well. So that would be a typical Rana thali.
Wow. I think in case you have not tried it, I'm referring to, I think, maybe people from India here. You must give it a try. We often talk about food as part of our culture because we grow up with it. The different foods at different occasions, festivals, weddings, your everyday meal, comfort food that you always go back. How does the food, that you have and the recipes in the book represent Nepal and, the various regions and things that are produced here locally?
Okay, I think culture, and cuisine is very, very closely integrated. When we talk about our culture, we talk about the religion, we talk about our festivals, we talk about activities, and I'd say, they in Nepal, most of it revolves around food. You see, we have over 50 festivals here in Nepal that we celebrate with great gusto. Each religious community, each ethnic community have their own festivals. And what do we do in the festivals? We pray to our deities, and days before we start, the preparation for the feast is what? Is preparing the food which we offer to the deities. and then consume ourselves very happily, because now it's blessed. We can eat it all, you know. And Nepal being a old Hindu kingdom, having a lot of the old Hindu culture and the tantric religion as well, you know, being very imbibed in. There's a lot of meat and alcohol being offered to the deities. That usually doesn't happen in the Sattvic society, but here I think it's more tamasic, more tantric, so that it's a beautiful, let's say, fusion.
And it's quite acceptable as part of the
Totally
everyday.
acceptable, totally. You know, all we are, you know, the high class Hindus as well as uh, the Nevars, the Rai, Gurung, Magar, Limbus, all the ethnic communities, all imbibe meat and alcohol during a religious festival. It is absolutely offered to the gods first, blessed, and then we are allowed to copiously imbibe it. So we've got a blessing from the
And that's
gods.
really interesting,
Yes,
how
yes,
culture becomes part
yes,
of,
yes.
everyday food habits. You also talk about Chaurasi Vyanjan, in
Chaurasi
the book.
Vyanjan,
And
yes.
I think there is a special significance for it and a story behind it. So why don't you tell all of us a little about it?
Okay, Chaurasi Vyanjan has its history dates really back to the epic times. One of our great epics, the Ramayana, in which Ram and Sita get married. And during their wedding, King Janak prepares this big feast for his daughter and son-in-law, and wanting to look after his son-in-law, you know, maximum amount that he could. He asked them to prepare 84 different types. Chaurasi literally translates as 84. So there are 84 different types and varieties of food which are prepared and laid out in front of the bride and bridegroom after the wedding. This involves, there's always this it's a big plate or a platter made out of leaves. It's called tapri. And in that, they cooked a pathi. A pathi is nearly 4 kilos of rice. 4 kilos of rice is put into this leaf platter and built like a mound. It's like a little mountain there. And then it's decorated with dried fish and eggs, which have been, marinated in turmeric powder and mustard oil. And then for the rice feeding ceremony, where the child would be eating rice or grain for the first time, this Chaurasi Vyanjan had to be laid out. So then they would get a bird called Bhadrai and place it on top of the mound of rice. There would be a bowl of a live fish in front, and 84 different varieties of food, including a wild boar's head, a goat head, a duck, and fish would all be laid out. Now, I don't know whether, you know, there's one saying that all these things were put there so the child would be a little scared and start speaking. Another one is the fish had to be put to the mouth of the child and the bird touched to the mouth of the child. This live fish, that was the mother's honor. She had to, poor lady had to pick up this live fish and place it on her child's mouth. I think it was the auspiciousness of fish, which is included in the Nepali culture. Whichever anything, you know, that you are starting new, the fish factor is always there. They're supposed to be a sign of auspiciousness and good health and wealth and prosperity. So before the child is eating anything solid, this fish is touched to the mouth. And I think a badrai must have had the same connotation. So then during the weddings as well, they used to have this Chaurasi Vyanjan laid out. And the poor bride, just looking at all this variety of food, I don't think she was expected to consume it all. But anyway, it was laid out. I think it denotes that let there be prosperity and fulfillment in the years coming ahead to the bride and bridegroom. That must have been the thought behind all these 84 dishes being laid out in front.
Yeah, I think the whole image of plenty and
Plentiful.
for a special,
Yes, yes, yes.
occasion. But I think it's slightly similar to India as well, because fish is supposed to be
Fish is a very
auspicious in
auspicious.
Indian weddings, and
Absolutely.
you make sure you have it for certain occasions.
Yeah.
And we have Nepali and Indian people both here. So I wanted to ask you, what are the similarities and differences between Indian food and Nepali food, or are there any?
Okay. Now, this is an interesting question because the proximity of India and Nepal creates this, this area where the grains are the same. We have the same vegetation. We grow the same vegetables. We sow the same grain, and we eat it together. So there's hardly any difference in such between the meals consumed in India and Nepal. They have their dal chawal sabji. We have our dal bhat tarkari. Meat, whichever community eat meat, the meat is there, the vegetables are there, the achars are there, the pickles are there. The same ingredients are used, the same, let's say, the oils, the ghees, the spices, they're all similar. So in that way, there's a lot of similarity. Then there's this very subtle difference. The nuance is in the 2 or 3 spices which are used in Nepal and not used in India. Mainly two are Timur and Jimmu. They are a mountain, I think, derived from the mountains. So in India, it's not so easily available. Timur is like Sichuan pepper, and Jimbu is mountain allium. It's like a dried chive. So those two really are not used in India much. Might be in Ladakh and the hilly area of India, but in Nepal they are widely used and used in all the dishes, and they bring that different taste because the Timur has a very pungent taste, so it immediately spices the dish. Another difference I feel in Indian and Nepalese cooking is that Indian cooking, at least North Indian cooking food, is very rich, having the Mughal influence, Lucknow area, Agra. So there's a lot of thick gravies, more spicy, lot more, seasoning used, lot more oils and spices used. While in Nepal, I mean, I've been here for a long time now, and the food is the most nutritious, I think, most
Lot of greens.
a lot, it is so well balanced. Our diets here in Nepal, every Nepali once a day at least eats his dal bhat tarkari. And that's a perfect combination of carbohydrate, protein, fiber. You get your greens. Every day they must have their saag. So the saags are there, the fresh pickles are there, the old pickles are there. And now fermented food has taken out a great, it's really
It's
coming
now
in.
international and global trend, but I
Absolutely, it's
think
coming into
been
the food scene, the arena so much because fermented food is supposed to be extremely good and healthy for gut health as well. So I think Nepalese food is, I feel, is more nutritious than the Indian thali.
okay. We'll take your word for it, but I think they both have their own
Absolutely.
uniqueness. India being a very big and diverse country has various cuisines in different
Yes,
states.
yes.
So we leave it at that. But I found some anecdotes and stories in your book really fascinating. For example, you referred to the staunch eating habits of the Ranas and staunch and strict
Yes,
eating habits of the Ranas, and how there's an incident where Jang Bahadur I mean unconsciously there's a faux pas at Queen Victoria's dinner table. So why don't
yes.
you tell all of us a little more about it?
Right. So this real epic character, Jang Bahadur, who created history, I must say. So his first journey to Europe was in 1850, and he was one of the first South Asian important people to visit Europe and to visit England. He went to UK and then on to France and Europe. Basically, he went to create good relations with the British and to imbibe their culture and learn and come back and try to promote whatever he learned from there. A lot, I think, had to do with the military, but other architectural, if you see after his journey, the architecture of Nepal, Kathmandu literally changed, and a lot of the costumes that the people wore, the formal costumes were worn by the army were copied from Britain and France. One thing that was very interesting and created, I think, a bit of furrow with the people looking after the Nepalese delegation, which was quite massive, was their eating habits, their culinary habits. Now, being staunch Hindus, and they were following the Dharma Shastra. According to the staunch Hindus, according to Dharma Shastra at that time, even crossing the ocean was not supposed to be, it was quite a taboo. Then eating with people who were non Hindu, meeting people, This was Malech Sambandh, Sampark. It was literally, it's a word called Malech Sampark, which was written there, that you are meeting people and are going to be in close proximity with people who are non-Hindus. You're going to be partaking of food and drinks with people who are non-Hindus. So the funny thing is that there were gallons of water from the Ganges, Ganga Jal, was taken so that every time they shook hands with a Britisher or with a Frenchman or someone who was not of their caste, they could quickly cleanse themselves with the water from the Ganges. And they would be drinking it and cleansing themselves with it. Then the food habits. They had their own retinue of Brahmin cooks who would cook their food in their quarters, because Hindus at that time did not eat rice cooked by another caste, except for their own wives and family or of a Brahmin. So the Brahmin cooks went along so that they could, feed them that one meal of rice at least. Whenever they were invited, I hear, to Queen Victoria's banquets or whatever, they would only take fruits. So, I'm sure the people looking after this delegation must have had a difficult time, because there was all these beautiful pheasants and goose and whatever prepared, and there the Nepalese are sitting with their little fruits there and eating the fruits. So that is the story of
Yeah, that
Jang Bahadur's trip to England.
must have been quite a sight.
Quite a sight,
You
quite a
know,
sight.
because
I think,
banquet and then you just stick to fruits. I think
yes, yes.
you can very easily stick out. Through this festival, we have been talking about Shakti and Bhakti yesterday and even today. And I wanted to ask you about the relation between Shakti, Bhakti, and food.
Right. Okay. So the theme of this Kalinga festival this time was Shakti, Bhakti, civilizational connection, Nepal as the center for global thought. I'll stick to the first sentence. I think we leave the global thought in Nepal out of it. But Shakti, Bhakti, and the civilizational connect. Now you wonder from that line, what is the connection to food? I'm going to try and put across to you that Shakti and Bhakti and civilization connect can be displayed through the conduit of food. In our Hindu culture and religion, Shakti and Bhakti play a great part in both our countries. Uh, Nepal is the birthplace of Sita, Gautam Buddha, and Rikuti, who was later known as Tara. And they were both part of two of the most widely followed religions in the world. Being embodiments of Shakti and Bhakti, Durga and Shiva are supposed to be Shakti, and Bhakti is devotion. So these two concepts have intermingled beautifully in Nepal as well as in India, because Nepal is the home of the highest mountains in the world. And a lot of ascetics and saints have come here for meditation, to gain knowledge, and to promote religion. So doing that, we come to the factor that there are three gunas that we follow, three principles of life that one can lead and get. The human body gets affected when you are following these three principles. The three principles are sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. These are the three different types of qualities that you imbibe, and they are imbibed through food. If you are a sattvic, you are eating vegetarian food. You're eating basic, very simply non-processed grains, vegetables, fruits, and let's say dry fruits. You are sustaining yourself on that. According to the Hindu religion, it's supposed to be proved scientifically now. Uh, all these principles of eating this very, very light vegetarian food calms the mind, embody, and you are allowed to perform your yoga skills better. And it's not an agitating factor. This is all supposed to be calming the mind, peace of mind, and you can meditate more easily. While on the other hand, Rajasic and Tamasic are gunas are the other side of the spectrum, where they embody strength, power, and Shiva and Shakti are both embodiments of power and force, destruction. Now, those things are imbibed by the tamasic guna that we have. Tamasic is onions, garlics, meat, alcohol, spices. All these, and and even fermented food. All these things, if when eaten and imbibed by the body, create restlessness, create energy, create strength. So Shakti and Bhakti are the two embodiments, which I think in Nepal, because we have the tantric religion still going on, where, like I just mentioned, we offer meat. In fact, we do sacrifice goat, buffalo, chicken sacrifice in front of our deities. We offer alcohol and, of course, consume it later ourselves. Now, the other spectrum where people are not like that, which are vegetarian, are doing the vegetarian, they're just on, they're living on fruits and vegetables. So both the embodiments of Shakti and Bhakti are very closely entwined in our country.
Well, thank you for explaining it so well, because we sort of maybe have not linked it to food in this way. Although we talk about, the Rashtric qualities and Tansik and
Yes.
Sattvic, of course, which is difficult to follow, I suppose, for most of us. Um, I also wanted to ask you, about the importance of preserving the recipes, the family recipes, which are connected with our parents, grandparents. It's part of our heritage and memory, while growing up. So, how important is that to you?
Okay, the old recipes, preserving them, going after lost recipes is a subject very close to my heart. When I was doing the Rana cookbook, I encountered a lot of recipes which are not in practice these days. People, because they are so labor and time intensive, that people have stopped cooking them. I'll just tell you just two examples of kanchobari and dudhswari. Kanchobari is a chicken ball which is made out of pounding chicken meat. You have to pound it until it becomes light and fluffy. Each piece of chicken is pounded. And then when you fry it, it fluffs up like a ball because of the amount of air that's gone in during the pounding process. Uh, Dudhswari is another one where these liters and liters of milk come out and they boil, and then they're allowed to cool down again and then boil. And the film on top that forms, the cream, the thick film that forms on top of the milk is slowly, turned into one thin crepe. So liters of milk are used for that one crepe, And one of my aunts, Jayapuja, came and she showed it to me. And I said, who has the time to do that? And she said, in the old days, that was an exotic thing to be, if the royalty were visiting, doodh swari would be made because, that was such an exotic dish. Today's world, where do we have, we have the time, the main thing is time, labor, who has the time, and the people to do things like this. So in my book, I have given a few suggestions where you can make it a little shorter and help yourself. But I thought if these recipes are not documented, they would definitely die a natural death. People who prepared them have all gone. Even the knowledge of how to prepare them, even the thought, people even don't know about them.
The techniques also,
The
the little
technique,
things when you actually
even
make it.
even eating them, is such a lost art nowadays. In our fast time of just fast food and on the go food, and no one has time for kachobaris and dudhswaris, though they are really tasty, I can assure you.
You've made all of us very, very curious. And on that note, I also wanted to ask you about your new book, the next book, which is coming out in January. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, my new book. While my first book was waiting to get published, it was lying with Random House, and they suggested that I wait, much to my agitation, because the pandemic was on. And Tarini, who was one of the girls I was dealing with in Random House, and she said, I don't want to lose such a beautiful book through the pandemic. Because she said the sales are so low now that, even if you print it, there'll be no. And my thing was, everyone's cooking during the pandemic. Shouldn't it do well? And she said, no, you can't imagine how bad the sales are. So while I was waiting 10 months for the book to get published, the idea of a new book came into my mind. And I thought, how can I just write about the Ranas? How about the different ethnic communities of Nepal? How could I leave them out of my food spectrum? So I started the research there, and there are about 126 ethnic communities here in Nepal. Of course, I could not document all of them. I've just chosen 10 or 11 of the main ethnic communities from which it was easy to get the recipes. So the second cookbook, the idea germinated during the time of the incubation during the pandemic. And I started working on that at that time. And I have tried in this book, it's like a kaleidoscope of the different ethnic communities. It tries to portray their culture, mainly through food, through the conduit of food. My forte is food, so it's based on food in the different recipes. While doing it, I just, researching, traveling, looking at the different ethnic communities, I was so fascinated by the rich cultural heritage that Nepal has. The costumes are exotic, the jewelry is beautiful. So I have tried to put in a little bit of that as well while going through the journey of food. I have just touched the tip of the iceberg. I can never do justice to what Nepal has as a cultural society, but I've just touched the tip of the iceberg. And that's what the new book is about.
Well, sounds fascinating, and you can mark your calendars for January when the new book will be out, which is the Nepali cookbook. Thank you so much. I think it was lovely, lovely talking to you and giving us a little teaser about your new book. If you have any questions, we can take them before we close the session. Okay, can you please pass the mic
Hi
around
there. Yeah, yeah. Bye.
to the lady in orange?
Namaskar. First, my question is to Rohini ma'am. I have just thoroughly went through the Rana cookbook, and all the recipes are so, I can just, it's so mouth watering, and for a foodie like me, it's like the recipes are so great. My question is that ma'am, as I'm a big time foodie and I also want to stay on the healthier side, but
Right.
you wrote the Rana cookbook and all the given all the recipes. I'm just wondering that how did you manage to stay on the fitter side also? And I also follow the follow you on Instagram, and I have seen all the stories of you conducting all the lunch and the way you present all the things. And I've always had this question on my mind: how did you manage to stay on the fitter side with all the foods around? Thank
See,
you.
the typical recipes in the book are very difficult to consume every day. First of all, they're heavy. There are some very light ones as well, like the kachu tarkari and the stir fry, the sags, and this, that. There are some sandeko masu and all is light. We eat very frugally at home. It's only at parties that I lay on the Rana cookbook recipes, right? But on a every day-to-day basis, our food is very much lighter. It's like a typical dal bhat, tarkari, jhol, masu. So that is so much lighter if you eat that sort of food every day. But like I say, once a week, any festival, whatever time, you're allowed to treat yourself and you'll still be slim.
All right, any more questions? Okay, with this, we come to the end of our session. Thank you so much, Rohini. It was wonderful talking to you, and I can't wait for the new book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Millie. Thank you, Aishwarya.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a wonderful session on food, culture, and more. It is often said that you can uh, find a person's personality from the food they love. And I'm as a foodie, I can totally relate to whatever you have said in the session. It's very enlightening. Thank you so much for the brilliant session. I'd like to call upon author and poet Adesha Das, ma'am, to please felicitate the speakers on behalf of the Kathmandu Culinary Literary Festival team. Can you give them a big round of applause, please? Thank you so much, honored guest. So this will be the last discussion session we have for the day, and following this session, we will be having a fabulous performance coming up by Abhilipsa Panda, mostly famous as the Harar Sambu singer. Uh, I would like to request you all to please wait for a few minutes before we get the stage ready for the singer to perform. Thank you.
परिवारहरूको ज्ञान अनि त्यो ज्ञान हस्तान्तरणको प्रक्रिया हो।